Breaking Up with Addiction is proudly supported by experts you can trust. Kindbridge Behavioral Health, safe, non-judgmental counseling just a tap away. Welcome to Breaking Up with Addiction. I'm Gwendolyn Boyd McGee, licensed professional clinical counselor.
And I'm Corinne Wright, certified recovery and executive coach. Did you reflect on your homework last week? And in case you forgot what it was, you were supposed to reflect on your dopamine-driven behaviors. Were you able to look back at the near-miss moments that drove you to keep going despite the risks? How do you think understanding dopamine's role will shape your decisions going forward? Well, I reflected on one of mine, and my last dopamine-driven behavior happened this morning. I get the highest highs off feedback and seeing results in my coaching clients. Gwen, can you relate?
Oh, absolutely.
It's a great feeling. And, one of the things that we try to do, me and Gwen, is when we look at, the behaviors that drive you in the wrong direction, we want to make sure you understand that those same behaviors have the potential to be managed by you in a different direction. Dopamine is not a bad thing. It's how we chase those dopamine highs that can turn it into a bad thing.
That's right.
In today's episode of Breaking Up with Addiction, we will dive into understanding the signs of habitual gamblers and how to break the destructive cycles. Gwen, let's talk about it.
Yeah, this first one, Corinne, I would like to use a scenario to illustrate this sign, okay? Okay, so we have Jane here, and Jane is about to have her 25th birthday. So Jane has went to college, and she's graduated, and she's been offered this great job, it's good, pretty decent salary. She's got some benefits, and whatnot. She'll be getting PTO. She's just super excited. She's like, yay, this is like the best time of my life. So she has her 25th birthday coming up. So she and her girlfriends decide that they want to take a trip to, guess where?
The casino.
Las Vegas. So, Jane, by the way, I need to let you know this. Jane has no history with gambling. Okay. So Jane, she's super excited, heard a lot about Las Vegas, can't wait to just, let her hair down. You know what they do. They say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So the girls go there and just really let their hair down, have a good time. So Jane goes into the casino and she finds a slot machine that she enjoys, right? So she's there playing the slots, having fun, having a few drinks, laughing. She's already said, hey, she's been given some birthday money. So she's like, well, I can lose like $200 or $300 and still have money left. So she's gambling there at the slot machine, having fun. She loses some, she wins some. And then Corinne, believe it or not, she gets this awesome payout. She wins $1,300.
Dread. I feel dread hearing that. I don't feel excitement for Jane.
Well, that's because we kind of have some inside information. Yeah. But for normal people, her girlfriends are like jumping up and down.
Yeah.
She's like, hey, drinks are on me. So she had this wonderful experience. She lives in Pennsylvania. The weekend's over. Her birthday's over. She goes back home to Pennsylvania, right? So she's like super happy about the money she won. She actually went and bought some, items that she normally would not buy because they're designer, they're expensive, right? So she does all that. And so a couple of weeks go by and she's like, wow, that was really easy for me to win that $1,300.
Yeah.
We have casinos here. I think I'm going to go check it out, right?
Oh, boy.
She goes there. And she says, okay, I'm only going to spend $200. I probably will only need $200 to, because I'm lucky. I'm going to win some more money. So she goes in there, but she gets to $200. She's been up and down, $300 up and down. And she's like, oh, I really said I was going to not spend more than this. So I better go home. Another week passes by. She says, I'm going to go back again. But anyway, to make a long story short, the time that she starts going more and more frequently, So do you see a problem developing here, Corinne?
I see it. I see it.
Yeah, increasing time spent gambling.
Gwen, that is such a perfect segue into something we beat with a hammer. We're always talking about
Yeah.
chasing losses. The story you told here, that's one way of what chasing losses can look like that isn't so in your face. Sometimes when the listeners may hear chasing losses, you're thinking about the person sitting there and how long they're there trying to catch up and, get back right. But there can be distance in how you chase losses. Jane went to the casino with her friends. She had a great win. She came back home. She started thinking about gambling. And she's like, you know what? I can go and do it again because I did it one time. And she goes and then she doesn't quite win, but she lives close enough to the casino that this could become something that's frequent now. And the purpose is different. At first was to celebrate. And now the purpose is to chase those losses, which lead to escalating bets. Because what else happens if you chase losses? You're not decreasing. You're definitely escalating and the escalation could be in two ways. It could be the fact that you're spending more money on the bets or the fact that you're betting more, spending more money. So this is something that I want to ask you a question. It's really complex because chasing losses is it can be a combination of both chasing losses and chasing feelings.
Right. Or a combination of both.
Or a combination of both. But what's crazy when you parallel this to imagining if you could control or if you had any control over falling in love. Gwen, do you think you have control over falling in love?
Ooh, such a complicated question.
It is because, we know what love feels like the first time we fall in it. It could be puppy love or grown-up love. But after you've had that experience, some people really want that feeling again. And so they'll go relationship after relationship after relationship, repeating similar behaviors that they feel got them love.
You're right, Corinne. That's a pretty good analogy.
Yeah. Same as the gambler doing the gambling over and it's behavior. It's us as humans. We're just human.
That's right.
So why don't we touch a little bit on what comes after or what comes next, Gwen?
Well, so we got Josh here. Okay. Josh is 34. He's been married for about 8 years. He and his wife have 2 children, a 7-year-old son who's, in school and a 3-year-old daughter who goes to daycare. So Josh is college educated. He works in finance and they live in New Jersey. He's making over 6 figures. So he takes care of most of, the house's, obligations, the bills. His wife also works. She's a school teacher. So they live comfortably, right? He's able to take care of all their financial obligations. They have money going into retirement. And they're able to take that wonderful vacation, once a year. So his buddies have been trying to get him to get involved in their sports betting. Okay. So one day Josh gets a bonus and he decides, I think I'll give this thing a try. So just thinking about him getting that bonus and using that money, is there something that comes to your mind? Like, clients when they separate, that is, I think, the beginning of when money becomes separated to that gambling money and real money. Wow, would you agree with that?
I agree 100% because this is money and I didn't even expect. I can gamble with this. The word gamble, that's exactly what I can do with this because I didn't expect it anyway. It's not a paycheck. The bills are paid, right?
Right. Yeah. So anyway, he gives the sports betting thing a try. So here we go. To make a long story short, he gets really involved in it and he starts chasing losses. So, the bonus money is gone. So now Josh is going into the retirement accounts, right? He's going into the savings accounts and he is being deceptive and hiding his gambling behavior from his loved ones. Does this sound familiar, Corinne?
Yes, it does. It does. And this sounds like some clients that I've worked with, Gwen, that have said out of their own mouths, they feel like they're living double lives.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and so his wife during this time, I mean, Josh is working overtime. He has two jobs, Corinne. He has the job of his normal finance position, and he has the other job of trying to cover up and make sure that nobody finds out what's going on with him and his gambling. That puts a lot of stress and strain on a person.
This is a split. It's kind of like it is double, because when you're thinking about the daytime Josh, let's call the one that had it, he had a system and it worked, the daytime Josh. And let's call the other one the evening Josh. The evening Josh is the one that's risking it all. Mm-hmm. And the daytime Josh probably does have it all together, or at least mostly, but that evening Josh has a behavior that it's almost like having a shadow, because I've heard some gamblers refer to the gambling addiction as like a dark shadow. And that evening Josh sounds like a version of like a dark shadow that's kind of creeping up on Josh from behind and whispering in his ear and interfering with his life. And it's like a friend, but that's not a friend.
No. And so eventually, because regardless of what people think they're doing to hide things and, to be deceptive. And these are usually people, these are not people who are in the habit of being deceptive and lying. But this is kind of where gambling has put them. This is where they're at. This is what their life looks like. So, all of this stuff is happening, but what is done in the dark will always eventually come to light.
Always. So the impact brings it to the light, right?
So what about Josh's worst nightmare? His wife finds out. Wow.
That's got to be hard.
Absolutely. She feels like,
betrayed.
Right. And besides that, with women, one thing, and I think we've touched on this before, but one thing that's really important for them is security, having that security. In her head, it's like all of her security has been stripped away. Here's this man that she has been sleeping next to for all this time, every night. All this stuff's been going on, and she had no clue. She had no idea. The savings account for all of their goals, empty. Retirement account, not only has he taken money out of that, he took it all. So, they're going to have a huge tax debt to deal with as well. Yeah. Because he made this really bad financial decision, out of desperation. And so it has turned this whole family upside down.
Those kinds of actions really break trust in a marriage or relationship. Even if you're not married, it can really break trust, because she probably, was so freely trusting that her husband, had everything in order to take care of the family.
Yeah, and he's a finance professional. Yes. Come on, friend. Yeah.
Gwen, that kind of goes into, now I'm imagining him, because there's a journey Josh is going to have to go through. He doesn't just cold turkey stop. Even if she finds out, this goes into the guilt and shame, and how lots of gamblers will still gamble in spite of feeling the guilt and shame.
Yes.
And, it's almost like the question, have you ever found yourself regretting a decision, but going back to it anyway? Have you, Gwen?
I have in my younger days.
I know I have in my days. Back in the days, you make a decision, the outcome isn't in your favor, and then you're back over at that decision, and you're wondering, wait a minute.
Come on, what is wrong with me?
What is wrong?
Why am I making these decisions?
Why? Yeah. And those are real questions that come to real people's minds. And, this is what gambling addiction and feeling guilty for your losses, but still chasing that big win can look like. It's like Josh feels so guilty for the losses. He has jeopardized his family's future here. But a part of Josh, in his impulse, still wants to get that big win to make it right.
Oh, yes. That's what's on his mind.
That's what's on his mind. And this is a cycle that many gamblers get stuck in.
Yeah.
It builds the things that you talked about, like the secrecy and, the pulling back and being more isolated. It's really tough to watch someone you love go through a gambling addiction and not understand what is going on with them. It's even tougher to know what's going on with them and watch them go through it. But we just want you to reflect on giving yourself, I know you mentioned this probably an episode or two ago, Gwen, about thought stopping. I just want to mention that here, because you could be Josh and you could be wondering, well, what do I even do? And we just want to always encourage you to give yourself space to pause before you act.
Yeah. Take that extra, 5 seconds even to really consider the consequences of your decision before you make it.
You know what I heard when you said that? I heard it in your voice because you say it in group all the time. Play the bad tape.
Yeah. Or play the bad tape.
Yes. Yeah. Play the bad tape.
And those listeners who are not aware of what playing the bad tape is, I'll just give you a really short version of it. It's just, your worst day gambling, whatever it was it when you lost all that money and you chased, the losses and then you couldn't pay your rent and you're calling everybody and you're asking for money. You feel like you're going to be homeless. Whatever your bad tape is. Maybe it's the day that you had told your spouse that you were not gambling and they've caught you in a lie 2 times before and they've caught you again and they're like, that's it, get out. Does this mean this is the end of your relationship? Is this going to change the dynamic of your family? What about your children? So all these things, all these potential consequences, it is so worth it to play the tape.
Yes.
Whatever that bad tape is, the worst tape you can find, because when you are triggered or you have a really strong urge to gamble, playing that tape just may be the thing to help you to avoid that relapse.
Absolutely. And we've seen people use that bad tape as that buffer between impulse and decision.
Yes, I've seen it lots.
Yeah. Are you guys ready for some trivia?
Yay.
Yay. Trivia. So today's question is, what is one of the most effective first steps in breaking the cycle of gambling addiction?
Okay.
Gwen is computing. She's processing.
I bet you're going to have a great answer for us later.
I am.
Yeah. So Corinne, let's kind of move over to the psychological and emotional drivers of gambling addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had that awesome, fantastic, terrific show with Dr. Kaufman, and we talked quite a bit about dopamine and the whole process. So I know we've talked a lot about it, but I just want to remind our listeners that it's how the brain's reward system kind of reinforces gambling behavior. Mm-hmm. Because see, this dopamine is dropped, right? Yeah. And so, I mean, the anticipation of winning, maybe the actual win, or even like we talked about last week, those near miss experiences. Mm-hmm. All of those things can be instrumental in transmitting that dopamine. So you have that dopamine there. The brain loves it. It wants to reinforce the behavior. So it's like, hey, we really like that. Do it more and do it more and do it some more even, right? Mm-hmm. So that's how that gambling behavior is reinforced. And that's why it makes it so difficult and complex. And a lot of people do need help to stop gambling. So some studies have also linked the gambling disorder with certain regions of the brain, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want to get all like scientific or anything and bore our listeners.
Get scientific.
But so the variations in the variety of the brain regions, like the striatum and the prefrontal cortex, mm-hmm. Those are regions that I think that are more involved with like the reward processing, social and emotional problems, and even like stress.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it can be different, genetically for different people, right? Mm-hmm. So there's like an emerging insight into people who may have gambling problems, who have smaller volumes in their amygdala and their hippocampus. Isn't that interesting?
For so many reasons.
Because these are the two regions that are related to emotional learning and stress regulation. So doesn't it make more sense now why adolescents are more susceptible and why the gambling addiction rates are higher, with that
Absolutely.
population?
They haven't learned yet, Gwen, how to manage their emotions.
Right, because the prefrontal cortex, it regulates impulsivity, decision making, and it's indicated that those things in adolescence develop slower. They're later to develop, especially in boys. And so maybe that's another reason why, even though the adolescent population does have the highest rates of gambling disorder, they are male, like the gender, the boys are the ones who struggle the most. So that kind of makes sense, right?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And especially for boys, a lot of the things a teenage boy or a preteen boy would be into are associated with things that are related to gambling.
Right.
Not to suggest that a girl couldn't be into those things, but socially, there's a lot more available to boys or designed to attract the male population. And, women play football. Yes, we do. But, there's just a slight difference in the things that are available to male versus female when it comes to, and not to suggest that this is gender-based, because gambling doesn't care if you're a male or a female.
That's
really
right.
Doesn't.
Does not discriminate any gender, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status.
Right.
Yeah, anyone is vulnerable, really.
Anyone is vulnerable to gambling. Anyone that has access.
And access is widely available, as we know. Yeah.
Escapism is another thing that we see a lot in the world of gambling when people are looking for the escape. It's not always about money. It could be money, it could be escape. And escape could be multi-layered. It could be for someone who just feels like they need to unplug their mind from things. It could be someone who's dealing with emotional strains. But escapism through gambling it often starts as a way to numb the emotions of stress and anxiety or the challenges that you have. I don't want to feel that, so I'm going to just escape into this activity. But what begins as a temporary escape quickly spirals. We saw it in Josh's story. He wasn't, and sometimes it's the people who have more access to more money who find themselves with, what else can I get into that can keep me occupied or give me another way of spending money or give me something else to do or another form of entertainment. And it just happens to be gambling.
Unfortunately, yes.
Unfortunately. And, according to the National Council of Problem Gambling in a 2021 study, nearly 1 in 4 people with a gambling problem report using gambling as a way to escape and cope. So
that doesn't surprise me, Corinne.
And that's a big number. It's 1 in 4. So in your friend groups, 1 in 4.
Yeah, but I feel like as Americans, we don't really have good, healthy coping skills and strategies. We are quicker to just grab something that can just temporarily change the way we feel, as opposed to really doing the work and learning what you can use, to be able to relieve stress.
Right. And I want to encourage our listeners to go back and listen to, if you are coming in and this is your first episode that you're hearing, we want you to go back to episode 1, because there are so many teachings that Gwen and I do on different ways of coping. There's a whole episode on coping mechanisms that talks about things you can do to de-stress. And if you're someone who feels like hearing some of the content out in the world, it sounds helpful, but you don't think it'll work for you, the only way to know for sure is to prove it to yourself. Get yourself a coach.
That's right.
Or a therapist.
Absolutely.
And then determine if it works for you.
Right, Corinne. So what about the intense emotional roller coaster that comes with gambling? The ups and downs, the highs and the lows, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So, dopamine, I hate to keep bringing it up, but, it's a part of that too. Because think about it. That whole roller coaster thing, what happens when you go and ride a roller coaster?
My stomach, it's just like everything is in my belly. I feel it. I get a rush. I'm like,
That excitement.
yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of the same with the highs and the lows, with gambling. So let's say the emotional highs, the wins. When a gambler wins, their brain releases the dopamine, right? Creating a sense of pleasure and reward. Yay, everything's great.
Yeah.
So this positive experience can be highly motivating, prompting the gambler to return and repeat this activity over and over. They want to repeat this experience. Okay. So what about losses? You're thinking, well, I don't know. That doesn't sound like it could be a high, right? Or something that could cause that pleasure, right?
Right.
So, but think about it, emotional lows, the losses. So you have these negative emotions, you're frustrated, disappointed, and even maybe feeling some shame, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then you want to try to chase your losses by betting more money in attempt to win the losses back. So that betting that more money, don't you think that there's some dopamine involved in that too?
Absolutely. Dopamine is all up in there except in the loss stage. There's no dopamine in that loss.
Yeah. The losses, I mean, and chasing the losses. And yeah, maybe in the beginning, there's a little dopamine when you're betting more money. And
right. When they're chasing the losses, yeah. But the feeling, the results afterward, of that loss, yeah.
It's horrible. And horrible. Most of the time, people will experience extreme depression, depressive symptoms like feeling down, isolating. They're unhappy, they're frustrated, they want to be alone, they don't want to talk to people. Of course, it's causing some insomnia because it's, constantly ruminating in their heads and they're having problems sleeping. All of that, you could just imagine how difficult and challenging that could be for someone, experiencing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It just takes it back to we talk about cognitive distortions often, and those are irrational or biased ways of thinking that can contribute to negative emotions and behaviors. And some of the cognitive distortions we've talked about in the past, like, the chasing losses, the near misses, there's also, here are a few more that I want you listeners to think about. Overgeneralization. Okay. And that I won before, I can win again. Mm-hmm. That's a blanket statement because you lost before. Could you not lose again?
Right. But it's just, yet they never think about the losses.
Yeah.
It's always about the wins. A person could have gambled or made a bet 100 times and lost 80 times, but won 20 times and would totally forget about those other 80 times.
Absolutely.
And just concentrating on the 20.
And will convince themselves that based on that 20 win that they're good at betting.
Yeah, so strange how the brain can trick you into that.
Mm-hmm. Another one is that just one more bet. How dangerous is that statement?
Just one more.
Just one more bet. This is
never
really
just
dangerous.
One.
Let me ask you this question though, Gwen. What happens, or you tell me, what do you think would happen if just one more bet met near miss?
Oh my goodness, that would be a mess.
That would be crazy because if I'm telling myself just one more bet and that one more bet I make gets cherry lemon on the halfway line, am I really going to do just one more bet?
Infinity. I just don't even see an end to that.
No, there is no end. And that's how people get roped into the cycle as well. It's like you'll tell yourself just one more bet. That's what you mean, but that game is not set up to be in your favor.
Right.
And another one is the self-deception, convincing yourself that you have the skills, that you have the skills now. And this is a lot of people. They'll say, I have the skills to get an edge on the game. And how can that be true when gambling is a game of chance?
Right. It's always going to be 50-50, Corinne. Always. It's either win or lose. That's it.
Yeah.
Now, there are those skill games like, poker and sports betting. Well, I think some people may guess maybe, but I think there are guys that really do the research and they have a system and they, try to beat it or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in those, some skill, I mean, you have to know how to count.
There's definitely some skill required, right? And that skill might be, I can play this game. That to me is what that skill really suggests. That skill does not guarantee you that you're going to win a time.
it means that, it means you know how, and that's why I wanted to point this out, because anytime there's room for discrepancy for our listeners, I want to try to challenge them on that, because I could just imagine them saying, well, I have skill, I do the research, but yes, you do. And maybe there is some skill in those, but it doesn't matter. It's always going to be 50-50. Let's say you have the best team in the league going against someone. The numbers are not good. The other team has not played as well. You're like, I got this. And you're putting all this money on there, right, Corinne?
Yeah.
Well, let's just say the night before the star player gets sick. They get the flu. And then they don't tell anybody to go to practice. And then they give some of the other players flu. I mean, this is a sick team now. Are you feeling as confident?
Because life, right? We have to leave room for reality instead of banking on the theory that I could win.
Yeah, that is exactly the point that I'm trying to drive here. It is always risky. It is always 50-50. Either you will win or you will lose. Yeah. So, Corinne, now that we talked about a lot of the problems and the challenges that people may be facing, I think it's time for us to maybe provide our listeners with practical tools to help them break free of this cycle.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I found this great news article out of North Dakota under the Health and Human Services, and they give 10 great tips to balance your betting and budget. And I really, really like this. I just felt that this could be, advantageous for our listeners to kind of help them to maybe be more mindful of the time that they're spending, and the money that they're spending and whatnot. So the first one, Corinne, set limits on time and money spent. Just what I just said.
And you know what, Gwen? That is a form of harm reduction.
Right. And I do advocate for harm reduction. And I'm going to tell you why. Some people, they've realized that they're having some issues and struggling with gambling, but they may not be necessarily ready to completely give it up. You want to work with them, and you want to be able to establish rapport and continuously use motivational interviewing to help them to understand how the harm that gambling is doing, to their life. And I've had a few clients like that, and most of them have just decided that they need to just completely stop. So, I mean, for those clinicians out there who are treating people with disordered gambling, just remember that you want to be empathetic and understanding with your clients. And if someone does come to you and they're not ready, just meet them where they're at. Right, Corinne? Meet them where they're at.
That's going to be a great recipe, because if you try to force recovery on someone, you could lose them. But meeting them where they are and walking them forward, that's winning. Because if they keep coming back, they're going to keep getting more and more, and the behaviors will change over time.
Right. Yeah. Just be patient with them. Right.
Yeah.
So,
firm. Patient but firm.
Yes. Patient but firm. So in addition to setting limits on time and money spent, I think our listeners should also be careful about alcohol and substance use.
Very careful.
Right, because intoxication can impair your judgment. So this can lead to being more risky, clouding your thinking. You wouldn't normally just go to the blackjack table and put $100 bill down. But maybe if you have a few drinks in you, you just may do that, right? Yeah. So, and walk away from your losses. We have consistently, over most of our podcast episodes, we've talked about chasing losses. I don't think there's an episode we've made, Corinne, that we have not mentioned that.
I don't think so either. And Gwen, when you said, walk away from your losses, I'm a cheap bettor. I got 20 on the gamble. If that 20 makes me some money, I'll keep playing. But once I lose a whole $20, and I know some of you are saying that's nothing, but listen to me. $20. I can put that $20 towards something tangible or food or something that anything but losing it. So once that's lost to me, my mind tells me anything you lose after this makes no sense for you. And so sometimes writing yourself an affirmation that sounds like that could be helpful. Anything I lose more than $20 makes no sense for me. I believe that.
Right. So, the bottom line is, though, really, Corinne, once you've hit your preset limit, you need to be out the door.
Out.
Right? It is important to stop and just walk away.
Just walk away.
Yeah. Another thing, treat the gambling as an expense, right? It's just, take it out of the entertainment budget. Don't have that in your head on, oh, I lost that. They have that $150 of my money. I need to go back and get it. No. Right. Just, go ahead and say, hey, we had fun. I enjoyed myself. I'll just write it off as an entertainment expense and just, and move on.
And make sure whatever budget you set, that's where you stop. If I have an entertainment budget of $200, you want to stay within your budget.
Yes. Don't extend the entertainment budget. Don't cheat. Don't extend the budget just because you now want to have a larger pool of gambling funds.
Exactly.
Yeah. And only take cash. Do not take your credit cards with you.
Amen. When it's gone, it's gone.
Yes, because it could get ugly. It could get really, really dangerous for your finances. You go there and you're drinking, you have a little cash or whatever, you go through that, and then you're like, oh, I want to do more. And then you maybe start chasing your losses, and you don't even realize how many times you've been to the ATM machine that night.
Right.
So don't take any cards so that you can go to the ATM machine. No, that's very, very dangerous. And choose the low risk, the slow play games. You want to go to the casino and spend time there and have fun and gamble? Well, go to the penny slots. I bet you it would take a whole bunch of gambling for you to get broke playing the penny slots, right?
Listen, I've actually seen people who have won off those. I'd rather risk, my 20 on something like that because the chances for me seem much greater. I have more to work with there.
And it's $20. $20 exactly. is not going to be the difference of you being able to pay your mortgage or rent,
exactly.
And all those other things, the bills. So make sure that you have a preset limit, that you don't take your credit cards with you, but you also want to make sure that you check in with your emotions.
Yeah.
Notice that how you feel. Are you doing this because you're experiencing stress and anxiety and you're just trying to, like Corinne talked about earlier, are you just trying to escape? If these are the things that you're dealing with, it would be more helpful to see a professional, get some therapy, talk to someone about it. That's going to be a lot more beneficial than you going and trying to escape in a casino and losing your money and causing things to be even more difficult in your life. Yeah. So diversify your entertainment. Please don't let the casino be your one and all.
Especially for people who might live in, towns where the casino is the big entertainment, right?
Right.
That can be a difficult situation because mentally you're in this small town that has not a lot going on and the only entertainment really is the casino and you feel like, well, there's nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. You're the type of gambler that needs to be putting the effort and intention into what you can do other than gambling. All gamblers need to do this, but we want emphasis on you because your options might be limited just based on where you are.
Yeah, but they can just make an effort to engage in other hobbies or activities like sports, creative pursuits, spending time with friends and family. Mm-hmm. So, just don't let gambling be the sole focus of your time, because if you do, I'm telling you that you are making a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah. And take advantage of technology. If you're having problems with maybe going on some of these sites a little bit too much, then you may need to get some kind of device or an app that you can download on your phone that can restrict your activities.
Absolutely. And, this leads into using that device also to track your gambling behavior. We mentioned this before. And, there's so many benefits in tracking your behavior. We don't want to leave you just at tracking, your behavior. We want to talk to you about why. So let's say you are monitoring your behavior and then you've gathered this information. What are you going to do with the information once you've gathered it?
Right.
We hope that you'll take that information and make a decision, but these are some of the things behind tracking that behavior. It increases your awareness, number one. This lets you know the world you really live in. Do I gamble a lot? No. Tracking your behavior is going to answer that question factually. It helps identify your triggers. Because now, Gwen, now that I'm tracking my behavior, I can see when I'm gambling. Now I need to think about why I'm gambling when I gamble.
Right.
What's causing me to do it when I'm doing it?
Yeah. What is the root of it? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then Gwen mentioned setting the limits. Setting limits on your gambling behavior. This is a big one because if Gwen mentioned setting those limits for yourself. If you're able to set those limits and meet them, now you're actually making progress because you started by raising your awareness. Then you went into identifying the triggers, the reasons why, what's happening that's driving you to gambling. Now that you've put this plan in place for the harm reduction, you're saying, I need to set limits, hard limits around this.
Right.
That's going to help you be held accountable. Somebody needs to know what you're doing here because where is the accountability?
Yeah, accountability is extremely important.
It is, because without it, if you have a gambling addiction and no accountability, that's a recipe for more disaster because who's going to stop you? Who's even aware of what's happening? And usually someone finds out and then the family is the reason that you do go to recovery. That could be an end. Or you could just say, hey, somebody has to get involved in this with me. This is what I need you to help me with. I'm trying to reduce my gambling behavior. If I do this, what's the consequence, right? You write the rules. And then, progress your monitoring, right? So you want to be progressive in how you're keeping tabs on this. That means every day that you think about gambling should be a day that you're monitoring your gambling. There should never be a hand off where this becomes back to passive behavior. Reduce the amount of denial that you're in about your behavior. If you gamble and you lose $100 to $200 every paycheck, you have a potential problem here because
right. That sounds like definitely.
What are you chasing? What is the goal of that? And if it's just for entertainment, like Gwen said, we want you to find other forms of entertainment that add value to your life. And then, this is personalized insight. This lets you know who you are. This builds the relationship with yourself where you can really get honest and real about what's happening. Yeah, and it empowers you to take control over your addiction. So Gwen, I want us to just touch on how emotional regulation plays a role in this.
As Corinne often does. It's also important to consider the things that you may be relying on and if they're healthy. Instead of reaching for alcohol, drugs, food, shopping, or whatever your thing is, or whatever you want to use to change the way you feel, Corinne, try to find healthy coping skills and strategies instead. And I know we talked briefly about this earlier in this episode, but it really is important. Everybody needs to know how to cope with the stressful things that happen day to day if you have a gambling disorder or if you don't.
Right.
Yeah.
There is something called cognitive restructuring, and this is a technique to challenge irrational beliefs and replace them with healthier, more realistic thought patterns. When we talk about things like cognitive behavioral therapy, Gwen has mentioned that time and time again. There's also a thing called cognitive behavioral coaching. And the reason I bring up the two and want to give you a definition of each is because for those who might feel stigmatized, we want you to have the knowledge to be able to seek the type of care that you may feel more comfortable with. So cognitive behavioral therapy is a clinical evidence-based treatment used to address mental health conditions like anxiety and depression. And it focuses on identifying and changing negative thought patterns to improve emotional well-being and behavior. It's typically delivered by licensed therapists and is structured to address specific mental health issues. So that's why it's called cognitive behavioral therapy.
Right.
Now, on the other scope, there is cognitive behavioral coaching, which many coaches who practice mental health are actually versed in. And this is a non-clinical approach focused on personal growth, goal setting, and performance enhancement. So this is something that focuses on instead of getting into the minutia of your mindset and depression and your anxiety, we're focusing on forward. So whatever that baseline might be, whether you're coming from some place of depression or anxiety or stress, these are techniques used to push you forward that still give similar results to cognitive behavioral therapy without you going to therapy, if that makes sense. And these are things that you would need to know, because as you're pursuing help, the help that we're trying to encourage you to get, the more you know, the more options you can put together for yourself to say, this could be a solid plan for how I move forward with my recovery.
Yes, absolutely.
And some additional steps to recovery, or a couple more things we want to talk to you about here, just before we end our talk on today's topic that covered a lot of information for you, but we do have a couple of more things to mention.
Yeah, I just like for our listeners to acknowledge and accept that you are in a cycle if you find yourself there.
And, practice emotional and cognitive awareness every day. And quickly, what that looks like is if you reflect on negative or impulsive thoughts in the morning, write them down. If you have your day that's going well and then you feel the urge to gamble strikes you, check in with yourself, write that down. And then ask yourself, why am I trying to escape? It's just you checking in all day, morning, evening, night. At the end of the day, you journal about what happened. So wake up, think about what's going on in your mind, go about your day. If you get impulses, check in, write it down. Even if you do gamble, you need to write that down as well. At the end, what happened? If you do this daily, you get to see a clear pattern of what's happening and where you're going.
Sounds like some great advice. And I'd also like to add, Corinne, that our listeners should feel free to seek professional support if needed. I mean, this could look like therapy or coaching, support groups like Gamblers Anonymous, or digital tools. And this podcast,
Absolutely.
If you know people that maybe are a little apprehensive, you feel like they're struggling with some gambling issues, but they're apprehensive with going forward to get treatment or to get assistance, send them our podcast. Maybe them learning more about this disorder and what goes on, and maybe it can help them to feel like they're not alone, and it can maybe normalize it some for them, which could really help with them getting the kind of help they really need.
Gwen, that is listen, I should have just basically, here's the answer to the trivia because you packaged it so well.
Did I?
I'm going to just read to you the question again from the trivia so that you can see where we are. The question was, what is one of the most effective first steps in breaking a gambling addiction? The answer to that trivia is recognizing the problem and seeking professional help.
Yay.
That's it. One of the most effective ways. Everything that Gwen just said. Recognize the problem. And we've given you the tools to do that. Self-check-ins, giving yourself, answering the questions in your head, challenging your behavior, setting limits. All that stuff is great. Do it with help.
Yes. Well said, Corinne. Well said.
Well, I think it's time for some homework, Gwen.
It is time for homework. So, listeners, we would like you this week to identify 3 things that you can do to try and break the cycle of addiction in your family. If this doesn't apply to your family, what about negative patterns of behavior that have been repeated from generation to generation? So again, that's identifying 3 things that you can do to try and break the cycle. And also, listeners, we have to do a shout out for our next week's show. It will be episode 11, and we will be breaking down and helping you to identify the different types of gamblers.
That's going to be
super excited about that.
Yeah, that's going to be great. Addiction doesn't define you, and breaking up with addiction doesn't have to be a solo mission. Kindbridge Behavioral Health offers safe, non-judgmental support anytime from anywhere. Visit kindbridge.com/appointments and start getting the help you deserve today.